Examine the physical reality of the ancient Near East. When the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, they achieved geographical freedom, but they stepped into this landscape as a population without structure. They possessed no civil governance, no judicial system, and no established framework. 3 days into their journey, that lack of structure met its first severe test. Exodus 15 records their arrival at an oasis called Marah. They rush to the water, only to find it undrinkable. It is bitter. The psychological toll is immediate. A population already exhausted by travel is hit with a sudden resource shock. The elation of their recent deliverance evaporates, replaced by acute survival panic. The text documents the resulting chaos in verse 24. The people turn against Moses, demanding, "What shall we drink?" This reaction represents a systemic breakdown of community trust. In a society without laws or established conflict resolution, a resource crisis causes the group to fracture and target its leadership. A simple biological need exposes a deeper structural void. Without a binding legal architecture, a minor delay in acquiring water threatens to dissolve the entire group into anarchy. To resolve the immediate physical threat, Moses turns to the divine. Verse 25 states he cries out to the Lord, who points him toward a tree. Moses casts the wood into the waters, and the bitter pool becomes sweet. Look at this ancient Hebrew text. Midway through verse 25, the narrative shifts into rigorous jurisprudence. There he made for them a statute and an ordinance. This sharp pivot suggests the physical miracle was a mechanism to capture a panicked population's attention. The event at Marah functions as a controlled environment for a legal test. It is here that the text first introduces the specific vocabulary of governance that will define the rest of the Israelite journey. This architecture is formalized in Exodus 15:26. God establishes a clear condition. If the people will diligently hearken to his voice and keep his statutes and commandments, he will put none of the diseases upon them that fell upon the Egyptians. He declares, "I am the Lord that healeth thee." Examining the ancient text, we find distinct legal categories. God ties physical preservation to a multi-layered covenant. Modern readers treat statutes, ordinances, and commandments as generic synonyms, but ancient jurisprudence separates these concepts. Failing to map these boundaries obscures the mechanics of the covenant. The promise of divine healing and preservation is strictly conditional. It requires the Israelites to understand and execute 3 distinct frameworks simultaneously. The first of these frameworks is chalk, commonly translated as a statute. Chalk is a divine command that bypasses human reasoning, a unilateral mandate from the top down. Because the logical why is withheld, you obey the instructions strictly because of its source. This submission to authority defines a unique identity, legally separating Israel. Chalk removes a society's reliance on its own intellect, forging the vertical trust required to anchor a covenant. The second framework introduced is mishpat, translated as an ordinance. Mishpat refers to judgments governing practical community life. It regulates socio-judicial equity, providing rules for managing property disputes, civil conflicts, and economic restitution. Unlike chalk, mishpat is built upon human logic, concerned with observable, objective fairness between 2 interacting parties. Mishpat operationalizes abstract moral truth into actionable community justice. It prevents a pressurized society of refugees from collapsing inward. The final framework is mitzvah, translated as a commandment. Etymologically, mitzvah represents the direct, intentional, and legally binding instructions from God regarding specific behaviors and worship practices. These commands draw the boundaries of acceptable conduct. They form the explicit behavioral expectations for those participating in the covenant. Mitzvah acts as the daily engine of the agreement, turning internal belief into tangible, repetitive action. As this diagram illustrates, chok, mishpat, and mitzvah are mutually dependent pillars of a single societal architecture. A nation cannot survive purely on abstract divine mysteries. It requires the practical friction of civil justice in mishpat, alongside moral boundaries provided by mitzvah. Conversely, a nation built entirely on civil ordinances operates as a secular state, Without chalk, it lacks the transcendent divine identity necessary to endure as a holy people. Returning to the expansive canyons of Marah grounds this data in historical reality. The transition from panic to order depended on the simultaneous delivery of water and the blueprint for social organization. God utilized a physical crisis to execute two actions. He altered the chemistry of a bitter pool, and he introduced a complete, interlocking legal framework to a vulnerable populace. The enduring lesson of Marah is exact and uncompromising. Consistent adherence to this interlocking legal architecture is the prerequisite for national survival, continued preservation, and divine healing.